Test. All right. Oscar, the levels are good? Okay. So I just want to start by welcoming everybody to the first capital project public presentation. Just to introduce myself to start, my name is Brendan Carty. I'm a member of the Board of Education. I'm the chairperson. We've been putting on a lot of events this year, this being one of them. I'm joined by Terry Dade, who's our superintendent. Harvey Sotland is our assistant superintendent for business, remember. And John's here, although I don't know if John wanted to be recognized, and Nancy's here as well. And we have, throughout the night, you'll see people passing out mics. Our communication committee members, so they are a community who have volunteered in this effort tonight. So the goal of the night, I want to imagine that people are coming in this for the first time. Maybe they don't know anything about the capital project. Maybe they've been following since September. Maybe this is, you just got a link 5 minutes ago. So we're going to try to give you the whole story, where we've been, the funding, the process, the long-term plan, everything that you need to know about this project, hopefully will be tonight. So just want to kind of talk about what we're going to talk about, and then we'll dive into it. So why a capital project in the first place? What's in the capital project? I know the long-term plan has been something that people have talked about, have been asking about. We're going to cover that tonight. Very quickly, we will cover what's actually on the ballot. It's going to be a bunch of items, so we want to make sure everybody understands their choices. And then finally, we'll open it up for some Q&A. So there are two primary reasons why the district is pursuing a capital project right now. Its needs and funding. Many of our facilities are just in critical needs of repairs, and we actually are in a unique position to fund these repairs without raising taxes locally. I'm going to dive into each one of these separately. The need, it's really, I want you to think about this a few ways. So on the one hand, our school district has many critical infrastructure needs that have long been in need of repair, but that doesn't mean that we haven't been working to maintain them. Our in-house buildings and grounds team has been working, for years to keep these up and running, doing a phenomenal job. But there are some projects that simply can't wait, that are too complicated for an in-house team to cover, and that's where a capital project comes in. One of the things that precipitated this was the 2020 Building Condition Survey, which identified a bunch of needs throughout the district that would have to be addressed in order to meet state health and safety standards. Now, on the funding side, as I said, we're in a good position, a unique position. The district has a fully funded capital reserve fund, which is $5 million. That covers the community's share of the project. I'm going to go into what that means in a little bit, but just to give you a high-level overview. The district also has $3 million of debt service that is coming off the books that it can also contribute to the project. And then there's the $15 million in state aid. So $5 million plus $3 million plus 15. That's how we get to the $23 million capital project without raising taxes. Again, that's just a high level. I'm going to go into detail a bit more on that in a bit. All right, so what's actually in the capital project? I know we're going to show some images here. I want to give you the detail you need without going too far into it. But generally speaking, the project will allow the district to address needs at all 5 academic buildings while also making key investments to the athletic program. So the academic buildings, again, we're going to see them in more detail, but things like rebuilding bathrooms, mitigating water infiltration, replacing aging windows, fixing cracked pavement, repairing HVAC. The athletic improvements, the project will create a multi-sport synthetic turf field and synthetic track at the high school that could support over 400 athletes and 1,250 spectators. Now, let's go school by school. So in the high school, that's just going through these line items here, restoring masonry wall in the auditorium that's been getting water. That's a roughly 20-year-old building. Installing baseboarding, ductwork in the band and chorus rooms, HVAC in the lobby area. The tennis courts currently, which you'll see in a second, are in a particular state of disrepair, so they would be demoed and rebuilt. Then there's drainage issues at the lower athletic fields, so baseball, softball, and then a walking path to the athletic fields as well. So a chart is one thing, but what does this stuff actually look like? So these are the tennis courts that I mentioned. Frankly, there are more pictures, but I wanted to keep this somewhat concise. You can just see the depth, the width of these cracks, many of which are on the playing surface itself. You can just imagine a shoe getting stuck, ankles turning fairly regularly. It's to the point where, frankly, they're getting to be unplayable. So this is what we would consider critical failure. That on the bottom left there is the auditorium wall. Sort of looks, looks okay, but it's been taking on water, so those issues would have to be mitigated. These are those lower fields. These pictures were actually taken on 2 different days, just to give you a sense of how common this problem is. You can tell one of them is a sunny day. It was a light rain the day before, and still standing water. Okay, so we'll get to the, I know the multi-sport athletic facility is at the high school, but we'll get to that as a separate item in a little bit. Just move to the middle school right now. So this is quite a bit of work. You can see here, rear parking lot, catch basin for a parking lot. There's extensive cracking to the masonry. Some exterior doors and frames are just woefully outdated. There's a rear entrance storefront system that you'll see in a second that is in obvious need of upgrading. The locker rooms, I don't know if anyone has been in the locker rooms. You will take a quick virtual tour in a second, and I think that'll give you an impression of the current state of those. That would be a complete demo and rebuild. And then there's the gymnasium air handling unit, which you'll see. HVAC in the locker rooms as well. That would be part of the demo and rebuild. And one item you're gonna see pretty regularly now from now on is rebuilding the bathrooms. So the middle school and then all 3 elementary schools will get completely demo and rebuilt bathrooms, and you'll see why. And that's, by the way, that's not just what you see in the bathroom, but the piping and plumbing that goes into it. In fact, some of the bathrooms, as you'll see, are in varying level of aesthetic condition. Some of them you walk in and say, oh, this doesn't look so bad, but those pipes haven't been touched sometimes for, at least for decades, in some cases, multiple decades. So while it might look okay, there are just extensive problems behind the walls that this project would then alleviate. Okay, so these are the middle school parking lot issues. I mean, again, I don't want to bore you with 10 pages of potholes, but this gives you a sense of the condition. It's fairly extensive. That bottom right is the rear entrance storefront system. There's almost a look of impermanence about the structure, but it has been a permanent structure, so that is in need of upgrading. This is your first look into the bathrooms. Again, this is at the middle school. I mean, I don't want to do a play-by-play of disrepair here, but obviously, this is one, I mentioned some of the bathrooms look better aesthetically than others. This does not fall into that category. Some of the need is fairly obvious. I mean, sinks that, I mean, you think middle school, so there are fifth graders, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds coming in and out of these bathrooms. It's been a very long time for these facilities in particular. Then this is the middle school locker room. Again, just a pretty widespread disrepair. Cracked tiles, just missing equipment. Very difficult to keep, to maintain a facility like this. You can only put so many Band-Aids on something before its usable life is clearly run out. This is the cracked masonry. Again, this is selective photos, but it's pretty extensive. Pretty much anywhere you look in certain sections, there's going to be examples of these sort of cracks, which are, over time, just threaten the structure itself. That's the air handling unit to the left there, very old, at this point, beyond its usable life. And then just one example of an exterior door that, again, this one is particularly old, and there are just new options when it comes to safety and efficiency for these doors that far outlast what this was intended for. Okay, moving on to CES, the building we're currently in. So everybody that came in here went over the first item, which is the parking lot and bus loops. We'll see pictures in a second, but again, if you just recall your trip in here, I think the need is apparent there. Pavement is just kind of a mess all over. Replacing all the cabinetry in classrooms and the millwork that's throughout the school. And you'll see a representative picture in a second of why that is. Same thing with the ceiling tile and lighting. One kind of technical move would be to move the electrical transformer from pole to concrete pad. This is just for safety and protecting the equipment. And then, again, rebuilding the bathrooms just like the middle school and the other elementary schools. So that's almost $4 million just in this school. So here's some different shots. Again, we could fill up the slides with potholes, but just to give you a sense of kind of the disrepair that's going on. Bathrooms here, again, some of this to the buildings and grounds team and our director of facilities, Walter Moran. I mean, the fact that and so outdated, but they've been able to keep these facilities functional, and that's what sometimes you see. Oh, well, maybe that's not so bad. But remember how old and past its usable life a lot of these pipes and stuff are behind the walls. This is the cabinetry and millwork, and then you can see the top right. That's the ceiling tiles and watermarks, and it's bowing. This is, again, pretty much my two children are in this school, and I can tell you it's very general throughout the building. All right, so Willow Avenue, one of the oldest buildings in the district. This has, as you'll see, it's a hodgepodge of work. The rear loading dock is, and that whole area is a particular area of concern just because of the amount of weathering it gets, the amount of water infiltration. It just creates a lot of long-term problems for the structure. So those first two items would be geared at mitigating that. Then there's, you'll see some central stairway doors that just don't make sense for the kind of traffic that they get. The exterior egress out of the auditorium, frankly, looks like something you would not go down if someone dared you to, but this is just the product of how old this building is. Handrails and guardrails building wide. You might see that and say, well, is that really the most important item? But I think when you see it, you'll understand. And then the bathrooms again. So this is that area that I talked about. So on the left, that's the rear loading dock. And it is the idea would be to put a roof over it, and again, to just prevent further weathering from or deterioration from the weather. As you can see, it takes quite a beating. This is the egress. Top right is the egress out of the auditorium. I mean, you can just see from there the structure itself. Just I don't want to say it's. I mean, it just looks like it's been kind of cobbled together over time. So it just needs to be a fresh rehaul. And then the bottom right, that's the water infiltration, water mitigation issue. You just have a lot of pooling of water around there. And again, these are just things that start to eat away, corrode the integrity of the building itself. So this is bottom left, that's the handrails. So again, elementary school, K through 4, you've got little 5-year-old heads. Could easily go through one of these railings. And then you see on the bottom right the position of them. I mean, the problem is apparent. Top right, the stairway doors, that's a single passageway. Just imagine the inefficiencies that this creates. So again, just something that repairing is not doing you any good. That just needs to be replaced. All right, these the bathrooms here. You say, oh, that doesn't look so bad. But again, I would remind you of the outdated plumbing and all the problems that you don't see. And again, an image like this to me is a credit to our in-house buildings and grounds team, being able to keep these facilities that are beyond its usable life still somewhat usable. But at a certain point, that team just takes it as far as it can possibly go. And that's where, again, a capital project comes in. All right, so COH. This one has pretty extensive exterior work. So you'll see the masonry and brick. It's a very old building, so there's been a lot of wear and tear over time. This building would get every exterior window replaced, which is great on a number of levels, not the least of which is energy savings. Repairing and replacing lintels as needed. These are, to be honest with you, I've had lintels explained to me a number of times. I'm not sure if I am yet conversational in it, but they are like the tops of the exterior. I believe it's on the doorway, Walter. The windows. I know I got that wrong. Yes, top of the windows. Sorry. And then the mitigating water infiltration on the back auditorium wall, repairing the terracotta scroll. COH is a beautiful building. It's one of the most beautiful buildings in not just the district, but I think in the town itself, village. And part of this is, we talk a lot about pride, dragon pride. Some of this, beyond just being for safety reasons and functionality reasons, I think would really help bring out the natural beauty of these structures that has been lost over time. And then COH as well gets the rebuilding of all the bathrooms. All right, so here's some of that exterior work. You can just see bottom left, that masonry work has been taking a beating over time. So some hard to get close up as we did for the middle school, but you can see a lot of cracking and threats to the integrity of the structure. And then the terracotta scroll there on the right. This is, again, a very old structure. Takes a lot of rain. This is like a century of rain. And things get loose. Things need to be replaced. This is due to water infiltration. So this would have to be, sorry, I just want to get the verb right on this. Repair, I didn't want to say completely replace, but yeah, mitigating the infiltration. For a second, I thought, we're not going to knock down the whole wall. That doesn't sound right. So just mitigating the water. And then here are some examples of those windows. Again, just very, very old windows. in some cases, the benefit will be energy savings, which is phenomenal. In other cases, like you see on the bottom left, it's just going to be functionality. These are just designed for a different time. I want to make sure Ken got that shot. We good, Ken? I'll keep scrolling. I'll send this to you after. And here's the bathrooms for COH. Again, you know, credit to Walter and his team for keeping these things usable. But that's unfortunately the best thing that we can say about some of these bathrooms. Very old, decades since they were really given the overhaul that they deserve. Okay, so that brings us to the multi-sport high school field. So I put all this together just to show you how many parts there are to this, because you see the number, $8.4, $8.5 million, and you think, how could that be for a field? But there's a lot of site prep, a lot of things that go into, drainage improvements, things that it's not just laying down a carpet of synthetic turf. That's the last thing you do. It's what goes on top. And to address that while I'm on it, the life of that top layer of synthetic turf is typically given around 10 years or so. A lot of districts get like 15 out of it. People say, well, that's not very long, 10 years, 15 years even. Are you going to come back and ask the community for another $8.4 million? And the answer is no. This is just for putting the entire thing in. Once you replace the top layer, now you're talking fractions of that. I mean, it's not cheap. You wouldn't just do it on the fly, but it's much, much less expensive. So more of a manageable cost. More like, Harvey, not to put you on the spot, but about $1 million or so, just that top layer. About makes sense? Right, yeah. Okay, so that's what goes into, going from not having any synthetic turf or just having like a regular grass field and putting this in for the first time. But then, you can play on it for pretty much around the clock and all year round, and doesn't really take any maintenance beyond that. So this is what it looks like now. You can see, just generally, I think the sense is there's just not much there. It's a field. Strikes you more as a practice field than something that a competitive high school sports would play on. The field itself has taken on, takes quite a beating. You see some standing water there, not raining, but this is not unusual. The bleachers, that's pretty much it. Not really much in the way of spectator accommodations. So this is what I mean, where it's just you look at the field and you think this is not the kind of place that could support an athletic program. It is a field, and that's it. Okay. So now we've gone through, like why are we doing a capital project? What's in the capital project? I gave a little bit of an overview earlier on some funding, but I want to go a little bit more into detail about how this is being funded. So when a school district undertakes a capital project, a portion is covered in state aid. In our district, that is usually around 75%. It varies from district to district, just like any funding formula does. But our district typically qualifies for 75%. So the remaining 25% would be provided by the community, which is represented there by the district cost. Now, normally, that 25% would be in the form of a tax increase. But our situation right now is different. Thanks to long-term planning, the Cornwall Central School District has actually already saved the money necessary to cover the balance of the project, to cover our district share. You say, well, how did you do this? So back in 2018, the district created a $5 million Capital Reserve Fund with voter approval. This served as the district's capital project savings account, basically. Any dollar that was put into that capital reserve fund qualified for the same aid that you would with a capital project. So put in $1, any project that you fund out of that gets $3 from the state. That's the whole benefit of this fund. So it was started back in 2018. Over the last 4 years, it was created in 2018, so 3+ years of savings. The district has been funding that account, and now it's fully funded at $5 million. So now all these pieces start to come together. So that's how we get $15 million in state aid, district cost, again, through the fully funded capital reserve fund. And then the district also has $3 million in debt that's expiring next year. So that's how, you say $23 million, it seems like kind of an odd number, but that $3 million, that extra 3 on top of the 20 is a product of that expiring debt. So taking all 3 of those elements, that's how we can undertake a $23 million project without raising taxes. Okay, so how were these projects chosen? Because, I think that once we set as our goal at the beginning of the year to have a capital project without raising taxes, that's great, but then the task becomes, well, what are you gonna do? So just wanna go through how we got to this point of deciding on the projects that I showed you previously. So in October, the board had over $50 million worth of projects to consider. This came out of that building condition survey that I mentioned before. To whittle this list down to the $23 million that could be covered without raising taxes, we took kind of a dual approach. 2 of the board's committees, the Facilities Committee and Communication Committee, worked in tandem to identify which projects to include. So the Facilities Committee, like the Communication Committee, made up of community members, teachers, administrators, board members. The district's architect as well was there. They met twice a month for 3 months from October to December to define the scope of the project. At the same time, the Communication Committee, which is, again, the committee that's putting on this event here, spent months gathering community input. We did public surveys, community forums just like this one, regular email updates back and forth, frankly, and events, which is to say nothing of, I think, the constant stream of conversation that's been going on that committee members have been participating in and just getting, on-the-ground feedback from people. We would then take the results of some of those formal efforts, like the surveys, which we'll touch on in a second, and we pass that to the Facilities Committee. So it was a very symbiotic kind of process that by the end of it, by Christmas, when the Facilities Committee was ready to make its recommendation, the Communication Committee had already supplied it with results of surveys and kind of the takeaways from forums and things like that. So about that survey, I won't go give you the whole update on the Communication Committee's efforts, but just to give you the gist of it, one of the questions on the survey was to rank the areas they would like to see addressed in order of priority. And we did like a rank choice voting. I'm not going to bore you with the formula for it, but it allowed you to say what was your first choice, second choice, third choice, and you assign points based on that. So aging infrastructure was number 1. Athletic facility was a representative second, and site work, which is like parking lots and things like that, was third. We even asked very specifically if the proposal included improvements to athletic facilities without raising taxes, would you support that? 54% was a clear yes, 8% was no, 14% most likely, 25% wanted a little bit more information. So taken together, that's 68% were either yes or most likely, with only 8% being no. the reason I bring that up is that I know some have asked, hey, well, why are you including a field in the capital project? So the first answer is what we just said. It's representative of what people wanted. But there are some other good reasons as well that I just want to clarify. Number one, if the pictures gave it, I think, a little bit of, gave you a little bit of a picture of the current condition, but that field has taken a beating. Grass fields in general are not meant to be used by multiple teams in a single season. They need, or in a single year. They need time to rest, regrow, and a field in a high school, a multi-use field for a high school that has a vibrant athletic program, it simply doesn't get that chance. Number two, the district is running low on field space. And having a multi-sport synthetic turf field that can be used around the clock without having to be maintained, without having to be watered, it will greatly enhance that available space. And number three, a capital project just represents the best opportunity to replace a field. We're going to talk a second about things that the district is doing in-house, but a field is simply not on that same scale. Can't build a synthetic turf field, or really can't, any sort of premium level or competition level, I should say, field in-house. And you can't pay for a field out of the yearly budget. I mean, that would be, think of how much would have to get cut out of an $80 million budget to accommodate an $8 million field. That would be 10% of a single year's budget. So it's just not going to happen. The only way to do something this big is through a capital project where the state covers 75% of the cost. So you're either going to do it this way or you're just not going to do it. And frankly, it's a bit more tempting to do it when we are in a year where, yes, the state is obviously covering 75%, but the 25% has already been accounted for. And I would add a bonus reason. I just don't like lists of 4, so I added this as a bonus. We can greatly diminish the amount of rainwater that runs onto the lower fields. So one of the projects that's being included already would be drainage to those lower fields, which we saw before. But this would actually be an added benefit because the synthetic turf field would be built atop a modern drainage system. So currently there's rainwater that runs off that grass field and just seeks its lowest point. So it goes downhill and pools on the lower fields, oftentimes leaving them unplayable. But with a synthetic turf field, that water just gets absorbed down and then drained appropriately, so that you wouldn't have that sort of pile-on of rainwater. Little reminder, that's the need. Well, who's going to benefit from this? So a new high school field could potentially, I'll explain that in a second, support all levels of soccer, lacrosse, football, and track. That's over 400 student athletes. I say potentially because there has, throughout this process, one of the points of contention has been is by having a field at the high school, are we moving the football program to the high school? The high school currently plays at the middle school, the varsity football team. And the answer is no. We wouldn't be forcing the football team to do anything. The football team could continue playing at the middle school if it wanted. And we'll talk about plans for the middle school in a second. But the field would be there at the high school if they chose to play there. So it could potentially support football as well, but that would be up to the football program. Spectators would benefit as well. I mean, you saw what those bleachers look like currently. So comparing that to 1,250 seats, quite a difference. And then the district could benefit because new field, new track, expanded bleachers. This would make our district a prime candidate to host sectionals and other regional events. Okay, so let's get into, we mentioned there were a lot of projects that were identified originally that are not being included. So what happened to those? So the district has a plan to address all of these needs over the next few years. I want you to think of the capital project as just one part of that plan. It's really the first and one of the biggest components, but it's not the whole plan. For those projects that aren't included in this project, the district will be tackling them in one of two ways. In-house with our skilled buildings and grounds team, or in a future capital project, which we will begin preparing for. And I'll go through each of those in more detail. So the in-house work. During the facilities committee fall meetings, the committee, along with Walter Moran, who's our director of facilities, identified about $2.4 million worth of projects that could be handled by our in-house team. But I want to note that 2.4 is what these projects would cost if the district went out and paid the premium associated with third-party contractors. The cost to the district would actually be much less. Doing these projects in-house, we're getting the work done efficiently, but because our team is so skilled, without sacrificing quality. So it's not like we're taking, quote unquote, the cheap route, we're taking the more affordable route. And the reason that it's, aside from some of the more obvious reasons that going out to third parties would be more expensive, you have to, there are certain regulations that you need to meet. You need to pay what's called prevailing wage, whereas versus in-house, these people are already salaried. So it's not like your budget would balloon $2.4 million just to cover this stuff. Okay, so what are we actually talking about here? So these were the items that were pulled off of that initial scope of work that was under consideration. And you'll see some themes. I mean, certainly there are some things that an in-house team can do, and some things that are just going to be beyond its capabilities. But we're able to do quite a bit. So replacing the loading dock at the high school, or loading dock trench drain, repairing, building the rear perimeter walkway at the high school, installing pole lighting at 2 parking lots at the middle school, a backflow preventer, which is going to be pretty general throughout the district. You'll see that at the elementary school, Willow, and COH as well. And then also buildings and grounds office, and then the district administration office. So one of the things that we decided when we were going through all of the items that were being initially considered, we had to find ways to prioritize. So anything that wasn't directly related to students was taken off of the list for this project. So that's why you see more in-house work for the buildings and grounds office, the district administration office. We've decided to take a more efficient way of doing those and leaving the capital project for just things that directly affect student life. So that's a total of, again, about $2.4 million worth of projects that would be performed in-house. All right, so then there was that other bucket of projects that weren't included. So this is where we get into the future capital project. So after extensive review, the facilities committee determined that many of the items that were originally under consideration for the current capital project either had a few years of usable remaining life or could be maintained in a way to extend their current life, allowing them to be pushed to a future capital project. Things like if there was anything mechanical, boilers or something like that. There's just through maintenance you could get a little bit longer runway out of them. If in instances like site work, parking lots and things like that, you just have to be clear-eyed. Can we get a few more years out of this? If the answer was yes, then it was under consideration as less critical need, and therefore, you could start working towards a second project. Now, keep in mind, this would not be like past projects. This would be like the current project we're doing, and the planning for that would start now. So to prepare for this project, the district is actually putting on the ballot a new capital reserve fund. Just like the capital reserve fund we have now, just a point of clarity, when you fully fund a capital reserve fund, that's it. To put any more in, you have to start a new one. So that's what we would have to do. We'd have to start a new fund of $5 million, it would have to be, just like the last one was approved by voters, you're basically just starting a savings account for $5 million, and then over the next few years, you're gonna start feeding it through different line items in your budget. If there's any excess at the end of the year, you can base, just like you would for any savings account. So see, these are some of the items that were initially in that scope of work that I mentioned that would be under consideration. I have to put a disclaimer in here though, because we always have to realize that I, as a board member in 2022, can't sit here and make decisions on behalf of a board in 2025 or 2026. I can't say this is going to happen because, and the district can't say that because boards get final approval in public education, and we don't know, what that board is going to decide. All we can do is tell you what we are currently planning for. So, with that said, high school would get some extensive work here, as you see, roof, caulking. They would get lockers, replacing boilers. Again, these are all things pointed out by the building condition survey. I'm not going to go through pictures of all this stuff, not going to slow it down too much, but some of this stuff is fairly self-explanatory. Middle school bus loop, staff parking lot. So a lot of site work at the middle school would be included. Air handling units, you're going to see, again, site work and mechanical stuff. The kind of stuff that we could get, the mechanical stuff with maintenance, you can get a little bit more life, and then the site work, deemed not as critical. And then also there in the middle school, the athletic field, that would be what the field that the varsity football team currently plays on, which would obviously enhance not just the athletics or the experience for the varsity football team, but would just greatly enhance the usable field space for the district as a whole. CES, again, a lot of site work, some entrances, air handling units right here in the cafetorium. Willow would get some site work, again, some similar themes that you're seeing in the other buildings as well. And COH, boilers and site work. You may think, okay, well that seems like a lot. Would we be able to do that? So that's roughly, I didn't put prices on this, by the way, because as we all know, prices change, are changing right now. It's not useful to project what it's going to be in a few years. But you can think in terms of roughly, we're in the same ballpark as what we're doing now. So we're taking the same approach, starting a capital reserve fund, feeding it, and then the idea would be, in a few years, you'd be ready to pursue something like this. You are still in, these projects are still in the same zone as what we're currently tackling. So you could do this in a few years without, it doesn't take much imagination to figure out how you'd pull it off. Okay, so that was a lot of detail. Just want to give like a really quick overview of what this long-term plan looks like. So it starts, let's say, May 17th, capital project gets approved. That moves forward. Because that is moving forward, you have clarity now on what you can do in-house. For instance, if it didn't get approved, the in-house work would be scrambled because now you have to do a lot of the in-house work that would be included in the capital project. So all of those other in-house projects would go by the wayside. Now you'd have to tackle some of these more immediate needs. So if the project gets approved, okay, now that opens up the in-house work that we described to move forward. Let's say May 17th, the voters also approve the capital reserve fund. Okay. Now you start feeding into that. After a few years, that's fully funded. That triggers the planning for the second capital project, which then moves forward. Also add, these items are all dependent on one another. So, as I described with the capital project and the in-house work, if the capital project wasn't approved, it scrambles everything for the in-house work. If the capital reserve fund isn't approved, that scrambles everything for the capital project. Even if, you'll see in a second, capital project is broken up into two propositions. If one of the propositions goes down, that also scrambles things, because then you have, it reworks your priorities, because if, let's say, the field isn't approved on this capital project, it would just alter the calculations moving forward for any second capital project, because then a future board, I think, would reasonably look at it and say, I don't think the community wants to support athletic fields. So that would affect what, potentially, what a second capital project could look like. So again, it's a long-term plan, but it's dependent on all of its elements. You kick out one leg of this stool, it gets shaky, it falls down. All right, I've kind of anecdotally referred to what's on the ballot, but let's just get it in very clear terms. So there will be several items. The Proposition 1 is going to be just the school budget. So that's going to be, just like any other year. I'm not going to turn this into a mini school budget meeting. There will be, tune in tomorrow night, literally, for that. But that would be the Prop 1. Props 2 and 3 are the capital project, but those are being, again, broken up. So the building improvements, that's everything in the academic buildings, and then the high school athletic field, Proposition 3 on its own. And it would be structured such that Prop 3 can only pass if Prop 2 passes. Prop 2 is not dependent on Prop 3, but 2 has to pass in order for 3 to pass. And then Proposition 4 will be establishing that new capital reserve fund that will be used as a savings account for future capital projects or capital improvements. Okay. Now, very simple, when and where is the vote? If you don't know by now, it's Tuesday, May 17th. That's at the Cornwall Middle School gym, 6 to 9 all day, just like normal. Before we open it up for questions, I do want to actually share something with you. Not personal, I said that as if it was personal sharing. I know that we, as a committee, we've been making a lot of efforts to get information out, and it's been more than a few weeks, even a few months of just gathering things together, and I think we're now ready to unveil a lot of that. I want to start with, I know our current website there's a lot of information on there, but it's very difficult to, it's just not as easy to navigate, particularly, we're going to be having some more media to share with you, pictures, videos, and things like that, because I think, as you have seen here with this presentation, seeing this stuff visually is a lot different than just seeing names and numbers on a chart. So we're going to be pushing a lot of that stuff out, but to support that, we wanted to, there we go. We've created a new website, which you'll be able to, Oscar, I'm using somebody else's computer as I'm telling you how easy it is to use. So this is where, it's a lot of the content that is currently on the site, but we're going to be adding the videos and things like that. Just, again, going another effort to make the information as easy for the public as possible. This will be live, let's just say in the next couple of days, as we just make the switch over from one link to the other. But then also, as I've mentioned, we have some video content that we've put together, and I want to share with you actually the first video. Is that, okay. So I just want to make sure the volume is good, okay? All right, so here we go. And I should say, this is just an overview. It's going to be pushed out to the community. This is very high level, but we're also going to have a video that goes into each one of the schools. So a video for all the elementary schools, one for the middle school, one for the high school, and then one that just focuses on the athletic facilities. Again, we're just trying to do our part to make sure that everybody has as much information as they possibly can on May 17th when they go into the booth. They feel like, no stone has been left unturned. All right, so here we go. This is just the first one. If you live in the Cornwall Central School District, you'll want to circle May 17th on your calendar, because this spring, the district is proposing a capital project to make critical improvements to its facilities without raising taxes. This is a huge opportunity to improve our district and our community, and the time could not be better. For years, the district has been working overtime to maintain and repair its facilities. But now, there are many projects that simply can't wait.
Really comes down to 4 words: critical needs and critical failure.
The needs for our buildings all across the district haven't been addressed in a very, very long time. We've done a great job doing what we need to do to keep our kids safe and healthy, but there's needs identified in our building condition survey that really highlight the critical need for a capital project right now.
The reason why these items were chosen is, one, it's a component of finances. Well, what can the district afford to do? And those that are of the highest priority and have the largest impact to the student and the instructional program.
The project would allow the district to address critical needs at all 5 academic buildings: rebuilding bathrooms, mitigating water infiltration, replacing aging windows, fixing cracked pavement, repairing HVAC, finally building a multi-sport field at the high school, and more. That's $23 million worth of improvements. And the best part? There'd be no increase to taxes. That's because the district has been planning for this.
For every dollar that we spend, the state will give us 3. So we have $5 million in our capital reserve right now. So they will be giving us approximately $15 million additional dollars. That brings us up to $20 million. The capital project is slightly above the $20 million, and that will be funded from the extinguished debt service that's coming off the books within about a year and a half.
$5 million already saved, $15 million from the state, $3 million the district a chance to modernize its infrastructure off the books. The athletics and the arts without adding a single cent to local taxes. But it's not the only effort the district is making. The capital project is just part of to address the district's many facilities needs. For those projects that weren't included, many the district is asking voters to capital reserve fund this year, so it can start this project in the near future.
The Facilities Committee identified Phase 1, which were our highest prioritized needs. Began work on Phase 2. What are all the other items that wouldn't be addressed in with this capital project that would be addressed in addition to work that we would do internally in our district to address the needs?
$20 million of improvements, no increase to taxpayers, plus an important next step in the district's long-term plan. It's all on the ballot for May 17th, and the goal could not be clearer.
The last thing that we ever want to see being hurt because of a failing component of our building.
What we all want as parents is for our children to walk through their front doors of their school with pride. Pride in their school, pride in the hallways, the lights, the windows, everything that makes for a positive schooling experience is what we all want for our children, and it's what our children absolutely deserve.
The need is there. The funding is there. The plan is there. Make your voice heard on May 17th. To learn more about the capital project, follow the Cornwall Board of Education on Facebook. Find us on YouTube or visit our website, cornwallschools.com, and click Capital Project 2022. Thanks, and keep an eye out for more capital project content. All right, now we're going to watch the other 5. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to watch it. All right. Well, no, it's not. Oscar, MacBooks should have a touchscreen. All right. Okay. So I realize I've been talking for a while, and even when I stopped talking, I was still talking, oddly, through the video. So I'm going to stop for good and pass this one over to Tom. So we'll have 2 people handing out mics. Richard in the corner, and then Tom here. So just raise your hand for the benefit of the people at home. If you can just state your name before you speak, and we'll answer questions as well as we can.
Hi, my name is Joan Murphy. My first question is why on your proposal sheets do we have no detail on the athletic complex in terms of the cost breakdown like you have for the rest of the capital improvement?
So Harvey, I know this is something that has been asked before. So it's 8.4 million total, and then there's each line item. I don't know if you want to speak to kind of the nuances there.
There's a lot of items there. The reality is that it's very simple for us to put up. There's a lot of figures and facts up there. We can certainly do that.
Frankly, it's just a kind of like an editorial choice to keep it somewhat simple. But I understand what you're saying. We can update it before we share the presentation publicly.
Good evening, great presentation. My name is Ann Garty. I'm not clear on the $3 million debt that's expiring. Will that entail a refinancing of the current debt that's expiring? And if so, is there a concern about the interest rate that will have to be paid given the increasing interest rates in the current environment?
So what's occurring right now is we had done a project years ago. That debt is finally coming to an end. So that will be removed, so to speak. We will use that same amount, that $3 million of debt service, to now fund new debt, which is that $3 million. The issue with regards to interest rates, obviously that's a variable, but what I can tell you is that interest rates right now are significantly lower than they were when debt was issued back then.
Can you hear me? All right, my name's Tom Keene. I got a question about the locker room at the middle school. It's the second biggest line item on the whole project at $2.26 million. I absolutely agree that locker room has to get fixed, so I'm not questioning that. I understand it. I just don't understand why the cost is so high. Maybe if Walter's here, you could explain it, because it just seems like a lot of money just to do a locker room. So maybe you could explain that?
I can address that, and Walter can fill in if need be. The situation at the middle school is a complete demo. I'm not just talking about floors, ceilings, and walls. All that has to be redone. We've also got HVAC. There's the ventilation and so forth in that room is completely shot. We have showers that have to be absolutely just taken out. We have gang showers. We also have a lot of piping and basically piping that is exposed in the locker room that we need to get rid of. It's a big job. It's not just doing the lockers per se, or it's not just retiling. It is, if you went in there, you would see it. The other thing is it's a big space. It's both the girls' and the boys' locker room. So that's the reason.
Hi, my name is Nicole Pola, and great presentation. I actually was watching it online and kind of rushed here to make a quick comment, which isn't really settled in my mind yet. So I'm going to go back to the athletic field, and I come from the medical field, and we have a saying of do no harm, right, to patients and people and community. So I just need an answer as to why there's such a push for the turf part of the athletic facilities. And I think we're all, we want the best thing for our kids and the community. But I believe in the research that I've done, there is a clear risk that has not been concretely addressed. And so if there's a risk, for the kids, the community, I just don't know why I feel there's being a skirt around. And it's starting to really bother me. And it's showing me that the best interest of the kids is not at the forefront. Again, I think we could do upgrades in the facilities and everything for the students, for the athletes, for the pride of Cornwall. But I feel it's just not being addressed properly. And I kind of would like to know if somebody has an answer for me tonight. Thanks.
Yeah, so we, can I just ask a follow-up, just to help clarify? So when you say there are risks, can you just, we have done a deep dive on this, so I'm prepared to answer multiple sides of it. I just want to be sure I'm answering which risks do you refer to?
To run a health risk, right? I mean, I know a couple people have spoke in the past on the health risks. I've done my own research as well. And I just feel if there's no concrete proof that you guys could give us, and I see it the other way too, there's no concrete proof that the turf itself or the polypropylene or the components that it's made of, right, the crushed rubber and all of that, those ingredients. I just feel for my kids and the kids that my children play with, if there's a health risk there, I just don't know why that's not off the table. I don't think anybody in here wants to look years down the road and somebody, God forbid, we're all gonna die of something, right, unfortunately. But God forbid, a lot of us are dealing with cancer, have family members that have passed away due to cancer. It's just a really tugging at my heartstrings that it hasn't really been addressed. And I know Anthony Incano has been vocal. I know there's other people in the community that have been vocal. And I thought, I can't just sit back and be vocal myself because my kids go here and they love it here. So, and I'm actually a proud graduate of here. So I just wanted to speak my voice and my opinion because I think it's an issue that's important. It's health and it's our athletes. And our athletes are great, they're beautiful, they're doing exceptional accomplishments. But I don't want it to be just because we want a field that looks pretty.
So
And
I can answer that because
is the
it's
primary.
it's not the reason that we're pursuing this. So to that point, I know that we've had a lot of meetings, so I don't expect everyone to know all the meetings that we've had, all the discussions that we've had. We have gone pretty deep on this issue, and so there have been some potential risks. There's the comparison of grass fields to synthetic turf as far as injury, which I can address in a second as well. But you're speaking particularly about health risks when it comes to the crumb rubber infill. To be clear, there's no cancerous link in current data, but the data that has been submitted, allow me to finish. The studies that have been submitted have been, by their own admission, incomplete, right? And there's actually a CDC study going on right now, which is considered the benchmark study of crumb rubber, which is a two-part study, the first of which was completed in 2019, which was about the carcinogenic content of crumb rubber. The more important facet of that study is the long-term health risks to humans. That is not in yet because it just takes a long time. Under that consideration, the board completely shares your concerns. We don't want to be in a position, let's say in a few years, where this CDC study comes back, right, and says, well, actually, has some non-negligible link to cancer. So to that end, we have explored alternate infill materials. So it doesn't have to be recycled crumb rubber. It's the most popular because it's the most accessible and it's the cheapest. But we have, our budget projections actually include an allowance if we wanted to go higher and spend a little bit more for organic infill. I am one of 9 board members, so I can't speak for the final decision. It hasn't been made yet, but it has certainly been discussed and it is a viable option that we will be deciding soon. But if we went with an organic, for instance, that would, I think it's easy to say, or I can confidently say, there is no cancer link or health risk to organic infills as there is for artificial crumb rubber. So that would, and that has been pursued, by the way, by other school districts. Bronxville School District has taken the same path. They certainly did a deep dive. We did our own deep dive. I hear what you're saying, and I don't want anyone to think that as a board, as an administration, we haven't explored this issue in detail. And just as a reminder, because I think it is helpful to consider, the 9 people that are on this board ran for the board because we care about the kids. We don't make we are volunteers. We're only literally in it for the kids. So I don't think it's fair to say or imply that we're doing it for, vanity reasons because we just want a good-looking field. We are taking that part of our responsibility very seriously, and I think that we have identified a path forward that would allow us to avoid some of the health concerns that, though unconfirmed, you have pointed out are out there. The other issue, if for those who might be listening and are interested, is around the comparison between grass and, why not just do a grass field, right? A grass field, as I kind of mentioned in the presentation, in order for a grass field to really be playable, it needs time to sit after the season is over, get reseeded, and grow. Otherwise, if you just imagine every time it rains, someone plays on it, the field is essentially ruined. And that in itself becomes an injury risk. So the synthetic turf field has actually been proven on a high school level where the grass fields are not really maintained very well because they can't be because they're being played all the time. A synthetic turf field is actually safer for young student athletes as far as lower body injuries, things like that. So I think that's an important point as well. A grass field would have to be maintained very heavily and replaced every few years, which would get much, much more expensive over time than a synthetic turf field, combined with the acute injury risk of playing on a field that is not properly maintained. These are the factors that went into our decision to pursue synthetic turf.
Hi, my name's Reggie Hilaire. Thank you for the great presentation. I just have 2 quick questions. Suppose the proposal passes on the 17th. First question is, when does the work get started? And second of all, how does it get done this seems like a very massive undertaking, massive project. How do you do it when school's in session? You have 3, 4 schools. I don't know how many students you have in the district. So how do you do it? I believe I asked this in other board members' meetings. Do you do it off hours? If you do off hours, how does that impact the community, the houses around Lee Road or the middle school? How do you do it with the kids running around, with all these kids? Will they be in danger with all these work sites going on at the same time? So that's my concern, children's safety. So how do you do it?
So with regards to when we actually start the project, it would be our hope that we'd be able to start portions of it in the summer of 2023. There's a submittal process to the State Education Department. There's a bidding process as well. To your point, you make a good point about when does this get done when in fact kids are in session, school's in session. The project itself as a whole, we've broken up into different stages. There's certain work that, you're right, we can only do over the summer. There's other work that we would also explore to be done perhaps on second shift. There is some work, there's a fair amount of work that we can do actually while school's in session. For instance, the fields as an example. It would be properly cordoned off. There would be no danger of equipment or anything like that coming into contact with the children. But we can still do it during the school year, during the school day, because it's not actually in the building where they would actually be studying.
Good evening. My name is Bas Chakra. I'm relatively still new resident of the community. I have 3 kids, so I have a lot of stake in the game here. I have a few questions, and they're meant as a constructive criticism, not to take anything away from all the effort that has been put into this work so far by several committees. I came up with 3 questions listening to you, the presenter. My first question was the $5 million reserve fund was the whole thing, and you answered that yes, it was. So the question is, why are you spending the whole reserve fund on this, not keeping anything for something else, academic or any kind of,
I'm sorry, what was the last example that you shared? Because it might be important.
The reserve fund,
Yeah.
the 5 million, why is it spent in its entirety on this
Yeah. So
effort?
Harvey can support me with some of the details here, but a capital reserve fund can only be spent on capital improvements, facility improvements.
Okay.
So you conceivably, let's say you held on to it for, you wanted to spend 3 million of it, and you held on to 2 of it. You could only spend that 2 million on the same kind of projects you've already identified in that statement of work. And if they've already been deemed as the most important projects, I mean, you could hold on to it, but as part of this process, we've identified those as the most critical needs. So there's not really anything else to spend it on that has been deemed more important.
So it has to be spent on infrastructure.
Yes,
Okay,
cannot be spent on programming, anything like that. Yeah.
fair enough. Thank you very much. Second question is, why not, strategically speaking, why haven't you separated the renovation from the new construction? Why did you bundle them together? And I can give you examples from my own background that we do separate those two.
I mean, I think some of them, it would just be a difficult dance to play, to delineate, because some of them are a little bit of one foot in the other. I don't know, Harvey, if you had a...
Could you elaborate more when you say new construction?
Yeah, right. I mean, everything is renovation. When you improve bathrooms, you know, what have you, HVAC, that goes under renovation, versus building a structure that did not exist before. That's new construction. The complex we talked about, which is 35% of the whole amount.
The athletic.
That's fine with me, but like, why haven't you separated these two? And even I was more convinced that I have to ask this question when I saw the ballot, and the ballot is Prop 2, Prop 3. You can't pass, Prop 3 wouldn't pass unless you pass Prop 2. That's very confusing for the voter, believe it or not.
So I can explain. I think so. What you're saying is, you say new construction, you're referring solely to the multi-athletic field?
The athletic.
That is on a separate prop. That's two is all the...
No, talking about the capital project.
Yes.
On infrastructure.
I just want to be sure I'm in...
Late now.
I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I know, but with whatever time left, I mean, I'm just like warning everybody that it is going to be confusing on the ballot. I mean,
And I just wanted to go back to Mr. Carty's slide that we asked the community. I think if the community put it as athletics as a far third choice, I think we would consider what you said of maybe something else. Our community spoke progressive survey as the number 2 focus area. So, I mean, again, we were trying to follow input that we received.
yeah, my question is more like, what if? I mean, we can't go back in time, but I would expect confusion on the ballot.
So I am sympathetic to that. I don't want there to be any confusion. A lot of this we're tied in. We can't put whatever way we want. I mean, we have to phrase it a certain way, structure it a certain way. So I agree. That's part of what we're doing here, though, is to educate people so that we hit clearly what they can expect when they get into the ballot as often as possible. It'll be featured prominently. It already is featured prominently on our website. So yes, I agree. Our hands are a bit tied in how we can craft a ballot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's why we're doing stuff like this.
Yeah, so kind of for whatever time's left, like month and 1 week, I guess, residents need to know a little bit more. Kind of, I mean, you don't want to have voters go and get confused or be confused. My last question is about kind of convincing the residents that this, and I know there was a survey done and you came up with the statistics and, you know, everything, but again, I work at West Point, I'm an energy manager. When we ask for funding, you know, the Pentagon, what have you, the most kind of convincing part of our argument why we need the funding is to articulate very clearly in one sentence, one short paragraph, is what would happen if we don't get the project funded. That's it, like one sentence, one short paragraph. If you don't give me the money, that's what's going to happen to me. See? So they say, bang, take the money. So that kind of, I mean, this example is kind of works with the residents as well. What would happen if we don't have the complex? It's not like this is the complex, that's what the complex is going to give us. No, what would happen if we don't have it? Then you're going to be ready as like, well, how did you manage to do without all this time? I mean, this is, and again, this is like, we have like 1 month left. This is what I say my advice is that's kind of the point that the committees would have to make with the residents in order to pass the resolution, the propositions. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Cassie. I have come to numerous meetings and expressed concern regarding the multi-sport facility that is going to be adjacent to our property. We've heard a lot about the medical implications of turf as they impact children and developmentally the ramifications of those things. I'm not convinced that the deep dive that was done by the district really was thorough in terms of medical information, given that the gentleman who spoke to us regarding turf was not a doctor. Aside from that, I would like to ask you what research you've done in terms of the environmental aspects of covering 100 yards of ground with artificial turf, given that PFAS and heavy metals leach off of the actual artificial turf itself, not just the infill. And given the fact that all of us use wells, I'm asking the district what your responsibility is going to be when our water is no longer usable due to PFAS runoff and heavy metals.
I didn't know if you were, are you?
I guess,
Okay.
I'm waiting for an answer, I guess.
I just wanted to be sure you were done. Yeah, so there are steps that you need to go through to get a project like this approved that go through different state agencies that have expertise in this, and no individual school district. This is a question we get a lot, you know, like, well, what research have we done? All we can do is take the research that other organizations have done that are qualified to do it, and there is a reason that things as a public school district are difficult to get done. It has to go through a lot of different state agencies who we have to put our trust in, have these safeguards in place. So to quote the doctor who came to speak, you know, he said many times, I am not a toxicologist. He's, you know, was clear about what his expertise is. I'm not going to get into a back and forth on an area that I am not prepared to. I am a board member. I rely on the various state agencies that cover these kinds of rainwater runoff issues. So this is not a new process. Installing a synthetic turf field, many districts have gone through it, and we're going through the same process, putting in the same safety safeguards that they have.
So I guess my question to the district, are you going to foot the bill to run a water source to our homes down our road if in fact this results in our wells being spoiled? Because there is evidence that this is what happens. So that's a rhetorical question, because I know you can't answer that. But I also question the validity of the seeker documents that were submitted, specifically in relation to the impact on our neighborhood and our community that I've spoke about at numerous board meetings, and yet, you know, the box on this document indicates that there's not going to be any impact to the existing community or neighborhood. I've spoken at numerous board meetings expressing that there will be impact on our living conditions, and that's not reflected in the documents. No one's come to my home to see where I live or what the impacts are going to be on our neighborhood, in addition to the impacts on our water source, the traffic that's been brought up on numerous occasions that, again, indicates on these documents there's not going to be any impact to traffic. I can't believe that having a 1,200-seat bleacher system and Friday night football games is not going to impact the traffic by our neighborhood on Route 94 and the surrounding community. So I'm struggling with understanding how the district can answer no to these questions when I have come to several meetings and expressed concerns directly related to these questions.
I don't know the secret process well enough to speak to what they consider. So I don't know, Harvey, if you had any. Certainly, if it's an item that we have to follow up on, I suppose we could. But I'm not familiar enough with what secret process is, or the Department of Transportation to comment on that.
And that's where the architects and engineers play a factor. They're the ones that prepare that form. They're the ones that weigh in. They're the ones that do the analysis. So we as a school district rely on their expertise and rely on their knowledge.
Yeah,
we did. It was ahead of time.
We are taxpayers in the district. The architects never came to speak to us or see where we live or how this project is going to impact our neighborhood and our quality of life. So while they may be able to answer the questions on this form, or they think they can, we're here to tell you that this is not accurate. And you know who I am. I mean, I've spoken at numerous board meetings about these very issues. So I'm really disappointed as a taxpayer that I know we're doing everything we need to for the kids, but we live next to the high school. And no matter what I say at board meetings or any of us say, our concerns go unanswered or unheard. And when I read these documents, I was infuriated. You can't say that our lives are not going to be impacted by a multi-sport facility that's going to be playing game after game next to our homes with a loudspeaker system and stadium lighting. Yeah, and runoff, but I'm putting you on notice. If our wells are spoiled, it is the district's responsibility. We can drink from our wells right now. That may not be the case after this turf field is installed. And that is a huge issue, not only from a health perspective, but from a resale perspective.
Well, if I could just speak very narrowly to the runoff question. I mean, again, the synthetic turf fields are built with a fairly sophisticated drainage system, so I think runoff is assumed, but these drain in a very efficient way. So again, I don't want to get out over my skis and talk further about that, but I know that is a common feature and considered when these synthetic turf fields are designed.
Joan Murphy again. If you're not clear on how your architect has filled out these forms, and they've indicated there's no impact, I think you should be talking to your architect and your engineers and questioning how they went forward and filled out the form if it's not an accurate reflection of what this multi-sports complex is going to mean for the area around the high school.
I'm Kathy Squilini. I live in the neighborhood with all of these wonderful people here, and we've been there for many years, and we own that property, which is too small for what you want to do. But that's beside the point, and you can't repeat history. But if, in fact, you've split this capital project in two, then why isn't this paperwork done in two? Because the athletic complex will impact the neighborhood. Obviously, the renovations to the buildings are quite necessary and will not impact anyone's neighborhood. So maybe you want to think about that, and maybe have the architects do a second set of papers just for the athletic complex. And any one of us would be happy to speak with them and invite them onto our property to see just how close we are to this situation.
Hi, James Jackson. I have a daughter entering first grade and one in high school now. Are there any designs for the high school athletic field yet? Has there been anything published? Yeah, those that would maybe show the the drainage patterns and such. But just in general, I haven't seen those in the documentation I've looked for. It's out there.
Yeah, during the facilities committee evaluation process, there were some diagrams and drawings, and we can include
All right.
those. In,
yeah, no, I'll search harder. And why 1,250 seats? I actually live right behind Lee Road here, and come to the football games a lot. We get a couple hundred people, maybe 3 for 400 for a big game. I mean, obviously, it does create more traffic, and it does create some amount of noise. Although it's never been that bad for us, but that seems like a really big step up. I mean, I know athletics are important here. You mentioned trying to hold sectionals or those sort of things. I mean, those really big events really are disruptive. There's no way to get around it, whereas the football games as they are now, again, I'm the other side of the baseball field here, doesn't bother us really at all. We hear the loudspeaker in the distance for a while, not so bad. So really just why that big, I guess, is the question there.
I know we charged our designers with answering that question. One of my first experiences here in Cornwall was going to a football game, and I will tell you what you're able to seat appropriately with appropriate accommodations is not being handled with our current bleachers. So you have literally people standing everywhere, kids running everywhere, and then our visitor side has maybe 20, which is not appropriate as well. So this is all home and visitor together with ADA accommodations and the like to make sure that all of our spectators can be seated appropriately. So they did compare us with other like-sized districts and the like to try to get to a number that would be reasonable for our district. I would love to say we would have that data, but again, my first experience was eye-opening. There is no gate. There is no way to figure out who's in the stadium and out. Let's see, 250. Mm-hmm.
So if I can just address a part of that. So implicit in your question is the assumption that football would move to the high school, right? And that's what I wanted to point out in the original presentation. It would be available to the high school because it obviously would be there and be available to any program that wanted to use it. But it's not like the middle school field would go away. The program would be able to continue using that field if it wanted. And as part of the kind of that longer term plan section that we pointed out, that would be under consideration for a following capital project. And not to rehash I'm mindful of people who may not have got any background on this project. So just to, why the high school was chosen instead of the middle school, it's just having a high school facility. Well, basically, we had to choose which one we were going to do first, you know? And the high school facility would impact more students. Currently, it's the football program that plays on the middle school fields, which, you know, we're not choosing favorites between programs. We're just looking at numbers and how many kids would benefit most quickly. And it was determined that the high school field would benefit more kids faster. I don't want to, yeah, I don't want to get into what anybody's decision-making process would be. All I can say is it would be available if that's what the program wanted.
Barbara Gosda. In 2020, who did the building conditions survey?
CSR.
In-house people?
Architect. The architectural firm at the time was CS Arch, so it was not in-house. The district hired an architect to perform that survey.
I can get you, that's, first of all, the CS Arch was hired to also do.
Is you talk about an athletic field using artificial turf. That has to be mitigated every so many times that it's being played upon, adding whether you use organic material, rubber material, whatever. Does that mean that you also have to buy a machine to do that and have trained people to operate it, a building to house that in? And of course, you got to have inventory of this material. How much is that going to cost us?
I can answer with respect to the machine itself. The answer is yes, you need to have that machine. That machine reconditions it, kind of fluffs it up, so to speak. That is included in the project cost already with respect to the field.
And the cadence of this is not every time you use it. I mean, it wouldn't have to be maintained nearly as much as, say, a grass field. You know, it's not like, certainly if the infill were to get displaced, this is something that you'd want to go out and even it out, add more. As part of the initial, you know, delivery of all the materials, we would also receive excess infill, so that would be covered as well. I don't know exactly how long that would last, but it's something, it's not a new issue, so it's part of the planning for the process, and as Harvey said, all of that synthetic turf equipment is included.
And what about the people that you're going to need to utilize that kind of equipment?
The project itself includes, this machine is not something overly complicated. Walter Moran's staff would be trained on using this. It's not any more complicated than the Zambonis that operate and clean the hallways.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say one more thing. This board needs to listen to these people. Under different circumstances, we could all be in their position. You need to pay attention to what these people are saying. They're entitled to it.
So sorry, I just have another comment based on everything that people have said here. I'm curious then, do you guys have a backup plan to the artificial turf? Is there like a second plan that you guys thought about in case this does get voted down? And the other thing, just to address what we were talking about before, is I remember a couple years ago when 5th grade could be dropped back to elementary school instead of staying in, you know, CCMS. And it was coupled, though, with as long as everything else passed, 5th grade would be dropped down. In my view, the best thing at that time and for the kids was to keep elementary with elementary. And be, you know, it just gave the wrong impression. And so now this time coming around, it gives me the wrong impression as well. So I'm wondering if you guys have a backup to the artificial turf.
So just to answer kind of two parts of that. So like why is it separate? You know, there were two bonds you referred to, one of them, where the athletic fields were included. They were both voted down. So the board is trying to read the tea leaves. And actually there was, thanks to Mr. Jim Congelli, who was a board member at the time, extensive exit polling done as to, you know, around those no votes. So it was determined that the fields were a point of contention for a lot of people. Not, again, when we surveyed the public this time around, there seemed to be a very fair majority of those that would want to support an athletic facility without raising taxes. But, you know, in deference to the previous votes, or what we learned in the previous votes, we just thought the board decided to put it as a separate proposition in case there were, you know, still mixed feelings. As far as like backup plan, I mean, we haven't like itemized necessarily what we would do, but we would certainly reconvene in the fall and figure out another path forward. We wouldn't sit on it. But I can't say that, you know, there is as an itemized plan as, for instance, you know, we've itemized what the in-house work is. We haven't gotten to that level of planning. But we would re-engage those efforts in the fall.
I just have I think it's a dumb question, but it's something I thought of. I take you for your word that won't be any increase in taxes, but things happen, cost goes up. What happens if it does? Certain items increase down the line. Do things get cut from the budget or transferred, or does it, you go back to us like, hey, sorry, we got to increase your taxes. So what's the backup plan? What happens when cost goes unexpectedly high?
That's a good question. So inherent in the numbers that are part of the 23, there is contingency that includes price escalation and some other things. However, should the prices as a whole go above 23 million, the vote itself only gives the district the authorization to spend 23. So to your point, if the bids, all the bids all included, come in at 24, something would have to get cut. That would be a decision amongst the board to make.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of variables in that, like in the situation you're describing. You know, it's not to say that the price of everything goes up individually, right? So it would be dependent on what is most effective. What, you know, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and some of the pieces have gotten bigger, but not all of it. So you got to refigure how to work it together. So it's it's just too soon to say exactly, but there would be a thorough process, and the board would eventually decide.
Thank you. All right, I got a bucket full of questions, as you can expect. But before I do, I want to say that all of us, taxpayers, fathers and mothers, grandfathers, and everything, and I'm sure all the board members, we have one common focus: the safety of the children. We agree on that. Where we disagree is how we're going to keep the children safe. Presently, we have 3 fields at the middle school, and we have 3 grass fields at the high school. Correct? I got the numbers down right? It's important to understand and to keep in mind that New York State is moving toward our climate safety. Keep in mind that the grass field absorbs CO2. And I believe the number over 10 years, I think is 15 tons or something like that. On the other hand, artificial turf generates 55 tons of CO2 every 10 years. If you want to go to carbon neutral, you will have to plant 1,861 trees. I don't think we have any extra rooms in the school district to do that. So that will be coming up. We also keep in mind, and everything that we are going to say, I have already said it so many times in it. And Mr. Cashman reminded me every time I give him a letter. Right, so I want to focus on the things that's important. And the board has a letter, a 7-page letter on the health risks from Dr. Diana Zuckman, president of the National Research Health Center in Washington, D.C. And they are a group of scientists and medical people. The main scopus that they have is to consult with Congress, governors, and all the governmental agencies that require direction. And why the district has never acknowledged that or presented on the website, I don't know. But that is beside the point for the moment. The turf field has two problems. One, it has orthopedics for the children. Mr. Brendan, your number is 61% increase versus the grass field. Two medical studies that go ahead.
I didn't say that number.
Oh.
That's not the number.
But
I'll let you finish.
apologize.
Okay.
I'll retract that. Two medical studies they have followed 24 high schools. Their number is 58% increase. Grass fields versus artificial turf. So that is issue number one. Issue number two, even if we put a different type of infill on the turf, the basic problem is that the background material, which is the polypropylene and the polyethylene, which is the grass blades, contains the PFAS and PFOS. You can't get away from that. And we have a problem with the Washington Lake water system. We all know with that. And to be sure what the condition where all these people live, I went there and I walked that area. And if you ever want to see that area during a rainstorm, you got streams of water coming in, not only from the field, but also from the embankment around the perimeter of the field. You got thousands of gallons going down the hillside. It goes into the wetland, and those are state-recognized wetlands. And the wetlands are continuous from Dragon Drive to Golden Pond to, what's the name of the street? Shadowwood, then it goes underneath 94, and then there is dozens of acres. It's continuous. So we're going to be responsible if those wetlands get contaminated. And I believe I already gave you some information about another town in Connecticut by the name of Woodbridge. They did exactly the same thing that we did. They tried to pass the artificial turf 3 times, and 3 times it was denied. The 4th times, they confused the voters, and they went through. But they were smart. 2 things that they did. One, they got a breathing agreement with the company that made the turf field, that there was no PFAS in there. Second thing that they did is what I asked the last time. We need to drill testing wells all the way around the wetlands. And also, along with that, you need to check the drinking water so that you have a baseline what the quality of the water is. Now, if you read what I gave you, they also say that right after the first rainstorm, they had the water tested by an EPA certified lab, and they found chemicals. The water was contaminated. That's why they worry. You need to address that. The other thing is that Dr. Zuckman proved how many children are getting sick. And that goes back to the very first name that I gave you, Amy Griffin. She's the one that started. And she proved that in 5 years, she had 270 children coming down with cancer out of college, going through high school. You don't see them getting hurt. You don't see them getting sick. It takes time for that to develop in the young bodies. That's why I'm fighting so hard. You want to be fair? You want the artificial turf? Then you have to establish an insurance program. So if any of them gets sick, the school pays for it. But then who pays for it? Cornwall taxpayers. Now, let me ask one last question, then I'll sit down. Have you ever done a comparison as a backup plan for the high school and for middle school to put in draining system? So we can do it all at once instead of doing the artificial turf. I agree with the superintendent. I walk those fields. They're muddy. There is very little grass. But if we can do with the same money that we're going to spend on the artificial turf, take care of all the fields, wouldn't that be a better system? And I'll bet we can save money. And if you look at the high school, you can take the savings and put up a brand new field over there and give time for each field to rest. So you'll have 4 at the high school and 3 at the middle school. Thank you.
So I'll start with the drainage system, and that's not the only issue with grass fields. I mean, just the constant use that's required of grass fields. I mean, certainly the fact that the pooling of water is one issue, but just the wearing down of the turf over time becomes an issue. While we're on that, so the study that you were, I'm not quite sure what study you were quoting, but it was about the comparison between synthetic turf and grass for lower body injuries. So we had Dr. Andrew McNitt here. For those who don't know, he is a turf expert from Penn State, and he delivered a thorough presentation about this. The study he cited was at the NFL level, there are 16% more lower body injuries on synthetic turf versus grass. However, that's at the NFL level. And he was quick to point out, those are perfectly maintained grass fields. They are single use. They get 8, maybe 9 or 10 games a year. They are replaced, reseeded, and allowed to grow in the off season. That is just not the reality at the high school level. When they did, there were 2 studies. I'm not quite sure where the other one was. I think one was actually in upstate New York. And that was just high school, doing the same kind of test, lower body injuries, grass versus synthetic turf. In one study, that are, if anything, more prone to athletes than clarify on that point. You mentioned the polypropylene, PFAS. I touched on this weeks ago when we were talking about the decision to go with synthetic turf. Anthony, I never thought I would do this much research propylene or PFAS, but thanks to your continued advocacy, I have. So, just to be clear, PFAS is many currently in this room. It is one of the most chemicals that comes out of manufacturing environments and has been for almost 100 years. There was, I'm going to try to recall, fresh in my mind, but it was the American Society of, like the American, I think it was the American Chemical Society, did a study on randomly selected but popular consumer grade items, things that you would use every day across industries. 48% of those items contain PFAS. Much of those items are things that you put in your mouth. Plastic forks that you get at to-go container, the actual to-go containers, toothbrushes, even the bristles. To the point where 98% of Americans already have PFAS in their blood. It's just that prevalent. So the question is not, does something have PFAS? Because if that was the standard, we literally would have to knock down the whole school and rebuild it. And we might not even be able to, because there might not be options, frankly, for the things we see around us that would not contain PFAS. The question is not, does it contain PFAS, or does it contain anything? The question is, at what level does it contain it, and is there a mechanism for a transfer, right? Just because something is in a particular object, and I hold that object, that chemical is not transferring to me. And in studies done about synthetic turf and the synthetic grass, it's determined that there's just not a significant transfer, certainly not to the level that you would get from, say, putting a plastic fork into your mouth. So I hear you. PFAS is not something that you should be ingesting wholesale, but that's just because it's present in that material does not mean that it is being ingested at the level that would invite health issues. And about, gosh, I guess I touched on the drainage. I'm sorry? Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not, I try to be as straightforward as I can. I'm not an expert on what you're describing, and again, we rely on the hoops that we have to jump through state agencies in order to check those boxes, so I just can't speak on that. Well, Well, we'll to that point that was addressed before. I mean, as Mr. Sotland said, I mean, we will follow up with our architect about that. But I don't know if there's much more specifics that I can offer on that right now.
Excuse me, on that point, Tine, you are the lead agency. You already came out with a negative impact statement, right? And once that's the issue, EPA and DEC will not get involved. As I understand it.
That's not true.
What is the recourse?
So that's, unless you can show me where that is true, anytime that anything is going on in a town or a city, there's always mechanisms for follow-up as homeowners, as a community, and the like. So checking a box doesn't mean that nothing else can occur by way of research and things of that nature. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. Just like if something were to happen, again, the beauty of this is, as a board and as your superintendent, I live by the high school. I have 3 kids that will be in the schools and play wherever, that I just know that I get notices that I need you to pay attention to your water or X, Y, or Z because something has happened. So I just want you to know that we will do our follow-up just to make sure that we're going through the appropriate mechanisms with state agencies, including the state education department. But I just want to make sure that we know the what-ifs. We're just not able to answer now, but we would be able to address anything that was an impact on any of our aspect of our community with anything that we do, from a roof repair to cutting down a tree. All of those things, we have to follow appropriate safety, health and safety protocols for our students, our staff, and our families.
Okay, so I hear you. Then are you saying to the community that you will not use the short-term form and you will do a full environmental impact study to address all the questions that everyone has? You see, you got to understand, Superintendent Dade, that 8 years ago, all these people that you see in the community, especially those people that have homes there, our school was going to be overrun by 1,000 children that would be coming out from a proposed district, which the people from Woodbury, northern Woodbury, belong to this school district. And there was, Mr. Sutherland can tell you, and Mr. Cartwright, he's not here. He was member of the other board. 1,000 children were coming out of Legacy Ridge development. And we worked. We started SOS, Save Our Schools, and we, with the help of the town board of Cornwall, Mr. Randazzo was the president. We worked with the village board. Joe Gross was the mayor. I worked also with the school board, and we also worked with the Black Rock Hunting and Fishing Club, 1,600 members. We all worked together for 2 years. And finally, the school board decided, yes, the school are in danger. We need to bring out an Article 78. Am I correct, Mr. Sutherland? For 2 years. And we started with 4 people. And it got bigger and bigger. And I did exactly the same thing then that I'm doing now. I try to educate the whole board and the community. We're all on the same side. We just differ on how we're going to get there. Bottom line, because we live here, we live in Cornwall, and we want to have our grandchildren and their grandchildren go to the school system. Okay, we just had to get together. There is a way, in my opinion, and in the opinion of Mount Sinai Children Medical School. There's nothing better than a grass, better and safer than a grass field. There is ways. The problem is the artificial turf. If we can get rid of that, we can have everything. And if you like to, and I agree, when I heard you when you said the fields are a mess. I walked through them, and I agree with you. And I also walked at the high school. But you know something? When I walked at the high school, there is a way we can get another field out of there. If we really look at it, and any times, give me a call, Ian, I'll walk with you. Thank you.
I would just like to clarify something regarding the seeker process. I've read the 200-page seeker manual, and because the district indicated that this project is a type 2 project, it does not require an environmental impact statement. So I don't know if you are familiar with the seeker process, but the only way an environmental impact statement or survey would be done is if the district indicated this was a type 1 project, which you have not done. So there is no means of evaluating the environmental impact of this project because of the way the district filled out the seeker documents.
Correct.
I mean, I appreciate, Mr. Dade, that you say that the district is going to look into this, but you've already indicated in these documents that there's no environmental impact.
Yeah. So I
and
just
that
want to
won't be done.
I just want to be crystal clear, and I'll say it a few times. I rely on Mr. Sotland and other professionals and our lawyers to walk through what the appropriate steps should be for the appropriate filing of SECRA. What I was stating as a proud father of 5 kids, resident of Cornwall, is that a box check does not mean that nothing could ever be done if something is not. If I could just finish, I would love that. So I just wanted to be clear that it may not fit into that process that you're speaking of, the SECRA process. I just know, having lived in different places, that if something goes wrong, there are mechanisms by which I, as a homeowner or a resident, you don't just get to say because a box was checked that you can't check my well or something else that has happened. So that's what I was trying to express, just as a father and a resident of Cornwall, that's what I would expect. If anything, I went to Mr. Moran and said, something is not right here. We have mechanisms to review and mitigate whatever is wrong. That's what our board is here for as well. So I just want to be crystal clear that that's what I was speaking to, is that I know for a fact that if something goes amiss with anything in Cornwall with regards to construction or what we thought was in place, that there are ways in which that we could address those concerns.
I understand that, and the ways in which that we as homeowners are going to have to address it is to incur expense to have our wells tested, and if in fact we want to pursue legal action to address the seeker documents. So the onus is on me financially and us to prove you wrong, so to speak, or attention or make the process stop. So yes, there are ways to address this. I was attempting to have it addressed before by coming to all the meetings and speaking out. It wasn't addressed. Now the documents have been filed, and so the onus and the financial ramifications of that are on us. And if in fact our wells become contaminated, we have no recourse. There's no way to get rid of PFAS in drinking water. We all know that. Washington Lake is contaminated. The city of Newburgh no longer uses that as a water source. So if our wells become contaminated, we have no source of drinking water. And there's no way to get that out of the wells. So again, more financial burden for those of us who are impacted by this project.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that everyone is saying. I think that, in my view, we're coming to maybe a natural conclusion of what can be accomplished in this venue for this kind of conversation. I just think that, if you wanted to follow up, I think that this is probably a conversation that I just don't know how much more we can accomplish in this format. That's all. But certainly, you've been heard. And we initially were, I was initially targeting 8:30, and then when I finished talking, I realized it was already 8, so I threw that out the window. So a belated apology for that. But then I mentally pushed to 9, which we've gone past. But if anybody else, unless anybody else, I should say, has anything else to say or ask, I guess yes, Mr. Rivas.
Hi, everybody. My name is Oscar Rivas. I have 2 kids who actually come here to Lee Road. And it's been fascinating being a part of this process and getting to know all of the ins and outs involved with this project. And I wanted to share a unique point of view, since I was the one that did the video. And I've gotten to go around to all the different schools in the district. And I got to say that the Buildings and Grounds department, managed by Walter, has done a great job. Our schools are really, really in great shape. Whatever they can do on their end to make them shine, they have done. But just like a house, just like everything else, infrastructure, at some point, certain things just have to be replaced, and this is the process to do it. So I'm very excited that some of the districts have been taken care of. One of the things that I also got to learn about through this process that we haven't talked about much here, we talked a lot about the safety of the students and making sure that they're in the right field and things like that. And I appreciate Mr. Anthony and all the things that you brought up to the different board meetings. I think it's pushed the board to find safe ways to push this process forward. We've come up with organic treatments to try to make it safer for the kids. But there's also an aspect of, teenagers are starting to drive. And one of the things that I realized is that a lot of them are not even practicing at the high school. A lot of them have to go to Willow Avenue. They have to go to the middle school. They have to go to different places just to practice. I've seen the lacrosse team playing in the middle of the driveway because they don't have a place to practice for their games. And I asked the athletic director about that, and she said, I don't have a place to put them because everything is covered in mud. Everything is, the fields can't be used, so they have to go other places. And I asked her, what would happen if they passed the athletic facilities improvements? And she said, everybody can stay here. Everybody will be able to stay at the high school and benefit from all the programs, after-school activities, the different clubs, be able to go to the games that the friends are playing. So, and we have two propositions that we've got to consider. One is much needed for the buildings. We're going to be spending over $50 million in the buildings and the infrastructure and making sure it's all right. And I think we also got to take care of our student athletes and make sure that they're proud of the fields that they're going to be playing on, that it's going to be safe for them, and they're going to be able to not having to travel. I mean, we were all teenagers at once. We probably weren't the best drivers at that time, and going back and forth is probably not safe either. I mean, there's traffic studies about how safe students can be, and they can get into accidents that way. And I don't want to hear about a kid getting into an accident in the 5 corners because they were going to practice, So I think by keeping the kids safe at the high school, where they can have so many more benefits and be able to have a field that can be constantly used as safe as possible, as safe as we can make it, I think it's a great option for the district. So I just wanted to point out some of the positive things that are going to be, that this project is going to bring over for the community and the students.
All right. Thank you to everybody that came out, spoke. Thank you to everybody who watched online. I would just encourage you to continue visiting the website, cornwallschools.com. Click the Capital Project tab. We'll keep posting more updates between now and May 17th. Have a good night, everybody.